Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 26th of February 2023. This is your host, Nigel Creaser, and today we've got the second part of my conversation with Stephan Wiedner about psychological safety. Enjoy! So, what's been going on this week? Not a great deal. Some podcasts is being set up. I'm looking now. I've got something in the region of 5 interviews lined up over the next coming weeks. So it's bang, bang, bang. So it takes us well into the year for banked episodes and a few more scheduled or to be scheduled. So lots of really interesting guests, really interesting subjects, some subjects that I've not even thought about before when I've been working through. So it's brilliant, really enjoying the interviews at the moment. That's really not a lot else to say, really, this last week or two. Had some half-term time and a trip to friends in Scotland, which is... was lovely last weekend, and playing around with a few things with ChatGPT, with a few ideas coming forward for other ways of helping and training with project management. So keep an eye out on that. I'll when I get a bit more established with that, I'll probably let you know what's going on there. Interesting thing this morning, I've been listening to a podcast that a friend of mine shared with me, the Socially Distant Sports Bar podcast. Thank you, Boyle. Thank you, Darren. And they're listening to them and the way they have their podcast set up, and they were talking about their Patreon subscribers, and I thought, I haven't refreshed mine. And then I checked today and I realised that having set up the Patreon page, I hadn't pressed the go button on it. So for many, many months I've been, it's now years, I've been pointing people at the Patreon page saying, guys, you can go there and you can contribute, buy me a coffee, help support the show, etc. And I'm guessing that anyone who has gone there has gone, can't find it. But now, hopefully, having clicked the right button, it is live. So I've set up the Patreon page. I have a number of tiers in there. If you at the lowest level, tier 1, which I think I've got as $1 or something like that, or £1, whichever way around you look at it, you will get a mention on the show. So that will and have my eternal gratitude, obviously. If you £2 a month, you go to that. I will send you an e-version of when I were a project manager. And again, you will get a mention on the show. And you can see where this is going. Going forward now, we've got the next one, which I call a grin. You'll get a mention in my next book, an ebook, an e-version of project management, the sketches, and of course my thanks. If you jump it up to £10, I will... you will get it. You'll be mentioned in my new book. You will get a copy of each of my first 2 books and my eternal thanks again. And as you can see, and if you are very generous, you want to give £20 a month or $20 a month, I will send you a signed copy of one of my books, your choice really, and digital versions of all of my books. I will also be adding something in there about the audio versions soon as well. So there might be another tier, or I might drop it into those tiers. So if you do want to support the show, I would be really grateful. It would be helpful. It would help me with maybe employing a few people to improve the quality, and maybe use a little bit of marketing to get a bit more reach on the show as well. Or if you don't want it, that's fine. But now it is working, so there you go. So those who do want to do that, anything is appreciated. And that's it, really. I'm going to leave you to listen to the second part of the conversation with Stephan, which I know you're going to absolutely love. So look after yourself and speak soon. Cheers now. Bye. Yeah, you reminded me of something there, and it's kind of a little tangent in some ways, but I saw something 2 or 3 weeks ago on, it was a LinkedIn post, and it talked about desk bombing. I don't know if you've heard this phrase.
Okay, that's new to me, desk bombing.
It was absolutely ludicrous. It was, but I think it's probably related as well. There was someone who there was a conversation. They were having a conversation with someone and asking them, have they solved this problem? Oh no, I've written to them. I'm waiting to them. Well, they're only over there. If you pop to see them and have a go, and he said, well, I'm not going to desk bomb them. And it kind of like, what? Well, just going up to the desk and asking them. There's desk bombing, which to me, I just sat there and went, what? I wonder whether, again, that's where that, in that organisation, where that culture has come from, or maybe that's that individual. Is it that the fear of going over to someone's desk and saying, have you had a chance to look at that, mate? Which I would see as a normal, as I say, walking around, management by walking around, or even just any colleague, you pop and do that. It's a great way of doing it. It's like pinging someone an IM. But it seemed strange. And I just wonder whether that's, from a psychological safety point of view, whether that's something, those trying to drive those behaviours you talk about there. And it's the same with any culture, isn't it? Because, and I heard the phrase around culture being, you can have a really strong culture in a team, but that team may hate the whole of the rest of the organisation and be at complete odds with the rest of the organisation. But together, they're really solid, fantastic, strong culture and relationship. But they may not feel valued. They may not feel heard. They may not feel able to speak up as a team. And some of these things all relate there. It's by modelling those behaviours. And I know what you say about things being on the wall. I've seen organisations where you see them on the wall, where it used to be, you used to buy the posters that had the picture of someone on a bicycle, evolve or die, or all these different, riding along a cliff edge or something like that, which I thought they were lovely pictures, but actually when I look back now, they were kind of a little bit twee on what doesn't really do anything anymore. It's very much, I think, out of the back of the 80s and 90s of the kind of macho kind of business approach. But how do you communicate? How do you make sure that other people are living your values? You could be the CEO or the head of your project, and you might model those values, as you said, day in, day out. But how do you make it trickle down?
Well, I think first of all, Nigel, that while you might want to have a culture of, say, openness and transparency, you can have pockets within your organization that operate differently, that have some different norms. And you talked about that desk bombing. That struck me as so interesting, because desk bombing seems like there's a lot of value in being able to walk over to someone and ask them the question. And what's the downside to it? Well, maybe the downside in some environments is that desk bombing is an incredible interruption. Yeah. And so for an organization, and maybe even more importantly for a team, part of what we facilitate is a discussion around, okay, what are the norms and behaviors we want to have in this team that are congruent with the values of the organization? And I'll give you another example. One organization they sell products in big box stores, and they're basically the incumbent. They're the leading product. So they already get maximum shelf space and arguably maximum volume of sales for all of their products. And they've been around a long time, and their whole goal for growing the business is to develop new products, in particular products with some form of IP that they can protect through trademarks or copyrights or even have patents on. So they have within this broader organization, which is really set up to maintain and protect all of these brands. That's a risk-averse nature to their overall business. They have this rogue little new product design office that has to interact with the broader organization, and they're kind of this rogue office that's experimenting, trying new things. And when they interact with, say, the branding department, those branding departments are super focused on protecting their existing brands, making sure the language is just right, the imagery is consistent. And so when this rogue department is saying, well, we need to launch a quick website and we're going to get some user feedback, and they're like, whoa, stop, can't do that. That's way too risky, right? So you'll have conflicting perspectives on risk taking, for example, within an organization. Your law team, your legal team better have a very low tolerance for risk, and then your new product development teams better have a much greater tolerance for risk. And so you need to look at what works within your department, what works within your team, that ideally is still consistent with the broader corporate values that, for example, the CEO is trying to model and lead with. Is that helpful, Nigel?
Yeah, very. It draws to me a thought of, I heard someone from a major airport talking, and they talked about becoming an agile organization and being agile development. And they talked about the conflict that they had within their organization, where if you've got a retailer, a Costa or a Starbucks or whatever it would be, or WH Smiths or Boots in the UK here, that are just in that sales area, and if they have an app to be able to order a coffee as you walk in through the door or whatever, and for whatever reason that's not working, or the Wi-Fi in that little cafe isn't working because someone's rolled out a new router or something like that, it's not material to, it's annoying, it's irritating, and people want to do quality, but it's not massively. So taking those risks to do those kind of things is fine. But then they said, but then with the baggage handling, if the baggage handling system stops, the airport grinds to a halt. So the controls over the baggage system were like absolutely rigid, no changes unless absolutely necessary kind of thing. So it kind of makes I can understand those differences, and I never thought about, I suppose by having those two different approaches, you're going to get different levels of psychological safety in there for different people, because in that sort of protective arena, there's going to be, this is how it's done. We'll always do it that way. There may be some variant in there, but I wonder how do you do it in that sort of rigid arena where you allow people to have that, feel that safety and be able to talk, raise issues and things like that? Or is that kind of conflating two things?
I don't think it's conflating two things. And what I'm hearing out of what you're saying is that maybe in that rigid environment, you want to have, it's okay to have less psychological safety. I would argue that the opposite is true. So if the stakes are particularly high in any given team, then you really need psychological safety. If you're on the baggage handling team, if something goes wrong, you need to solve it quickly and efficiently. That requires kind of like an all hands on deck, open communication. Let's figure this out together. Put our egos, check our egos at the door, and let's solve this problem together. And it makes me think of, for example, the operating room. And Amy Edmondson's done a lot of research in medical environments. And it's proven to be incredibly necessary in the operating room to have psychological safety. Even though you have power dynamics, you have the surgeon who's basically the project manager or the leader, and you have all of these other disciplines in the room, anesthetists and nurses and et cetera, and they all have to work together. And obviously, when someone's body is on the table under the operating lights and the tools and everything, that is a life or death situation. And so the stakes are incredibly high. And so I think psychological safety is where it's so if we're going to answer the question, where do you need psychological safety and where is it okay to not have psychological safety, I guess. I think there's been a proliferation of the need for psychological safety in general in the last 30 years because of the speed at which change is occurring, right? If you look at Moore's Law and you look at how much new technology is being embraced, when televisions first came around, it took, 12 years for 50% of the population to have a television. And how long did it take for 50% of the population to have TikTok? 18 minutes or something? Something crazy, really ridiculous, right? Yeah, 12 months or, it's weeks and months, not years anymore. And that is wild, right? For the landscape to be changing that dramatically, that quickly, requires more and more psychological safety. It requires more collaboration and better. What does psychological safety facilitate? It facilitates quality information. So the more people feel like they can speak up and say what's on their mind, maybe a helpful metaphor here is that of the Titanic and an iceberg. And what happened? The Titanic obviously hit that iceberg because all they could see was the very top of the iceberg, and they didn't appreciate or see everything below the surface of the water. Now, what psychological safety does is it pushes that iceberg above the surface, so the issues are above the water and you can see them. That helps you navigate the waters much more successfully. Yeah. And you're not driving along with all of these hidden issues below the surface of the water. And as a project manager, that's critical, right? You need to have all if you're going to make a decision, if you're going to make a call, you better have all the best information available to you at the time that you're making that decision.
Yeah, it reminds me of a couple of things there. One, then, just as you said, project manager, the status report. I have a comment in one of my books, Lies, Damn Lies and Status Reports. It basically where you get the situation where someone doesn't feel they can be open and honest by changing the RAG of a report to red, because red is seen as negative, and what you will get is a lot more reporting, you will get a lot more shouted at, and you will get more, you're doing it wrong. Whereas actually what it should be in a psychologically safe environment is, I need some help, I can't solve this on my own, can you come and help me? And a lot of organizations don't see that in that way, and therefore people don't change the RAG status of their project until the last minute they can do, when it's too late to solve the problem. That kind of first thing that I got from what you said there. But the other thing was, and it's really interesting, thinking about I'm sure it's Toshiba and the Toshiba manufacturing approaches, the lean manufacturing and all those sort of things, where the idea that anyone on the line can stop the production line at any time if something's wrong. And that goes to what you just said there about the fact that you've got the surgeons, someone's going to be going there, and anaesthetists going, stop, we've got this problem, or nurses, hang on, what's going on? Because it's that, and feeling that is because you're doing it for the reason that is to make sure that patient survives, to be sure that the surgeon has seen it, to be, all those different reasons you'd be doing it. And the same for the factory where you're building a car and someone says, stop, it's got the wrong headlight on or whatever. You know what I mean? But rather than the traditional thing of thou shalt never stop the production, it's got to go through. It's all about getting numbers through. And I'm thinking, because that was that around the same sort of time? Well, I'm not sure. I'm just thinking about it because it's been around a while, that, hasn't it? The lean manufacturing idea, and that idea of them doing that, and maybe that was the 80s, and maybe that's kind of come together at that same sort of time. That work I think started even in the earlier than that. I think the 60s. Yeah.
Gosh, I forget his name. An American gentleman who spent a lot of time in Japan. Yeah. The name escapes me. Anyway, he was really looking at that whole lean manufacturing that was really pioneered by Toyota. And I have an interesting story. I can't remember if I read about it or heard about it on a podcast or listened to it on the radio. I don't remember the source, but there was an individual who was working in North America for an auto manufacturer that was, I think, purchased by Toyota or perhaps affiliated. I can't remember. And the point is, he went to Japan to learn about all the lean, agile manufacturing processes and bring them back. So he was trying to embrace and create that culture within North America. And as you mentioned, thou shalt not stop the production line was the key driving rule, if you will, within that environment. And so then they informed everybody on that line, if you see an issue, you must pull the line, pull that cord to stop the production line. Yeah. And what they did is they taught, they trained. Then they watched, they stood on the shop floor and they watched as issues arose and as the dynamics occurred. And there was an individual that had an issue and they would not stop the production line. And they had to go over, physically grab the person's arm, hold it onto the line and pull it with them or her. I don't remember if it was him or her. And pull the damn line, because there was such an ingrained message. Do not stop the production line, right? So it's amazing how powerful those norms are. And you need to overcome them, right? It's not easy, but it can be done. And in that environment, we all know the benefits, right? Because if you produce 1,000 cars in incredible amount of time, but every single one of them has an issue, well, think of the cost of recalling it, right? Or think of the cost of retrofitting whatever bolt was not on right. And all it takes is one person, stop that production line, readjust something. It might only take 5 minutes. Maybe it takes 5 hours. But 5 hours is a whole lot less than all of the hours and time that goes into retrofitting the error that could have been and should have been caught much sooner.
Yeah, it's like with that saving of time. It's like the way that some organisations are focused on their quarterly results. Don't look at their longer term relationships with their customers and only focus on those 3 months. And you can see the behaviours in organisations that have got that and their financial accounts and all that sort of stuff to the shareholders and all that sort of thing. You can the organisations that behave. It's that ingrained thing of it's fear, isn't it? It's fundamentally fear. Fear drives some terrible behaviours, or some very high quality short term behaviours.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, short term. There's short term benefit there, right? The way Amy Edmondson phrases that, it's that. Look, we're always trying to manage our reputations and how we're being perceived and looked at. And why don't we put our hand up? We can all relate to sitting in a classroom, teacher asks a question, and there's a reluctance to put your hand up and say, I have the answer. Or you have a reluctance to interrupt the teacher and ask a question. Well, why is that? Well, what happens to someone who asks a question all the time? Others might perceive them as just being annoying or being oppositional, or maybe you fear that the question you ask is going to be a stupid question, so you don't want to come across as stupid. And so these are all strategies that we use to protect our reputations, and it's easy to manage because if you don't ask a stupid question, then you don't concern yourself with having your reputation seen poorly. So all we do is say nothing. That's it.
Yeah, do you know what? Even at my age now, I've been in sort of commercial work now for 35 years. Even in recent days, I've been on calls and I had a few questions. It's a bit of banter, really, but someone said something around, trust you, still have a question at the end. That kind of comment. There was a couple of comments made, and even now, sort of. I've got a fairly thick skin at times, and I'm kind of used to it. And actually, the banter is fine, and I know the person incredibly well. But it still kind of irked me, and made me feel like not asking a question again. And it's quite interesting that can make you feel like that. It's as an individual, even now, and maybe even now is not the thing to say. It's just hard sometimes to get over those issues.
I think I lost you there for a moment,
just
Nigel. Yeah, my connection or your connection, one or the other, let us down.
Have we just lost you, Stephan?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? I can hear you. Nigel, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Got a bit of editing to do on this one then.
Hello, can you hear me, Nigel? Hello? I'm gonna... All right, can you hear me now?
Hiya, how you doing?
I could hear you, so I'm not sure what happened there, but I thought, well, I'm just going to leave and come back, and hopefully that fixes it.
Yeah, because your screen, you froze for a bit when I was talking, and then you disappeared. So, yeah, a little bit more editing than I normally do then for this one. Law of Sod.
Oh, sorry about that.
Life. It's not probably not your fault. It might be Riverside. Who knows? This is only a second or third time I've used this, so yeah, we'll see. It is saying we're just
we'll see.
Yeah, it uploads as we go along. So at the moment, it's showing yours is 80% uploaded. So it's got its knickers in a twist somewhere, which will be it'll get up there eventually. So
yeah.
We'll come back in. I'm trying to think of where we go from here. Yeah, I suppose we've got about 10 minutes or so. So I'll come in with another question here. So if I mark the clip here, then I'll know it's there. So thinking about my audience specifically, I do think of them every so often. They've got project teams out there. And they're in a situation where they want to get the best out of their project teams, and they want to make sure, and we were going to talk about like the, in quotes, great resignation and losing team members, and you mentioned it earlier. What couple of things would you say, actionable things that a PM could do to try and protect themselves, but also enable and foster that psychological safety within their teams, whether they be large, small, whatever? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, my first recommendation is for folks to really consider putting out their antenna, if you will, to tune in to how your team is doing, and more specifically, start to notice what actions, what occurrences might cause one or more individuals within your team to decrease their sense of psychological safety. And start to notice what are some of those things. And then do that for a little while and start to just tune in to folks. Because remember, back to that story I was telling of the individual who was checking in with all of his team managers, and it was bimodal, right? Half of them said, I don't know how my team's doing. And the other half said, yeah, they're stressed and it's causing me stress. Well, you want to make sure that you're the manager that knows what's happening with your team members. So you're closing the gap between what they're thinking and what they're saying. And so be attuned to what might be causing them to hold back, what might be causing them to, be reluctant to share or provide their input. And that's the start. Then the second piece to that is, once you start noticing something, just get curious about it. Say, hey, Nigel, I noticed that in our meeting, it looked like maybe something that Mary said might have upset you or caused you to be a little bit defensive there. Can you tell me more about that, or am I misreading the situation? So just bring some curiosity to it and ask people, and they'll hopefully tell you.
That's cool. Really good advice. And not difficult either, is it, really? It's just taking the time and thinking about it and being aware, isn't it?
Well, and I think it's a sneaky little piece of homework, if you will, because I think often, especially if you're really outcome driven and just get the results, you'll forget about the human aspect of the people on your team. And you might just be focusing on, okay, well, tell me the project status, give me the update. Is it green or is it red? And you started touching on that, where there's maybe some hesitation to admit that, yeah, you know what, I'm falling behind, and I'm going to say that right now it's red. The project is red. I'm reluctant to maybe admit that, but it is. And so maybe you want to consider, well, how do you destigmatize? Maybe you don't want to use red and yellow and green colors to signify where you are with the project. Maybe you want to try something different. In fact, I was on a panel discussion just last week with one of the participants, one of the panelists was from Cisco. And what they've done is they shifted the word from feedback to attention. So as a manager, as a project manager, for example, your job is not necessarily to give people feedback, because feedback immediately puts people on the defensive. Instead of just say, hey, we need to put some attention towards this. So if you notice something, then just say, hey, let's put some attention towards this issue. Then we can talk about it. It's not framed as feedback. So see how framing something slightly different, using different language, can make a big difference. Just like changing the colors from, maybe you don't use red, green, and yellow, even though it's a very logical system that everybody understands. There might be too much stigma there. So I feel a little bit long-winded there with my response, Nigel. I hope that was
no. That's
folks.
Really insightful. It gave me a couple of things to think about there. One of which is actually could turn it on its head a little bit with project status, and I may start asking my team why their project isn't red, rather than them explaining why it is red. Or why it's amber. It's kind of, why isn't it red? Let's assume every project's is going to fail. It's going to be red. Why isn't it red? And that's another way of thinking about it differently. As an individual, you can look at, why isn't my project red? Well, I've got good control here. I've got good control here. I've got good, and kind of change that around a little bit and make that context switch, which is really good. And the feedback model, again, I go back to the manager tools. They are vicious on the way that they describe feedback, and the fact that feedback is neither negative, is both negative and positive. And it's something that, as a society, I keep the phrase of the shit sandwich, I'm sure you've heard of, where you go into someone saying, yeah, it's and I've seen that advised on LinkedIn recently. Your shoes are nice. You're really rubbish at doing that job. Oh, I like your hair. What do you make? That it just makes no sense. It's a case of contemporaneous, when it happens, as soon as you can afterwards. That presentation you just did was fab. Keep them up like that. That's brilliant. And if you give as much, and actually there's more positive for most people to give feedback than there is negative. So when it is negative, it's a small drop in the ocean compared to that, because what we should be doing is reinforcing positive actions. So when people do something right, brilliant, great, keep up, do that again. But we don't tend to do it. We save that up and occasionally write something at the end of a performance year and then sit someone down as a big doom thing to give them feedback. And the sort of, it's hard, and I'm not brilliant. I try to be better at it, but I think, it's a bit crazy. I'm just looking now, and we're coming up on time now. And I'm really grateful for that time you've given me here, Stephan. It's been brilliant. Some really insightful and real thought-provoking stuff in there. What is there anything that you would last couple of things that you want to mention, or is there, you kind of covered everything you'd want to cover?
Well, the main thing I would love to invite and offer to your audience here, Nigel, is a free psychological safety assessment. So we use the Fearless Organization psychological safety scan, to measure team psychological safety. So if you're curious and you want to know what's the level of psychological safety in your team, you can put those questions to rest and actually just measure it. And we'd be happy to do that for you. And the way you can find out about that is go to Zarango, ZARANGO.com/free PSI. PSI stands for Psychological Safety Index. So free PSI. And I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to help you assess the psychological safety of your team. And then we would briefly debrief the results and then send your team a way to start fostering psychological safety to a greater extent. I would love to do that for you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So again, thank you for coming on the show. If other than the Zarango, if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about your work, what's the best way to get in touch?
Search me up on LinkedIn. I'm relatively active there. The URL to find me directly, if you want to punch it in, is linkedin.com/IN/S Wiedner. So S, my first initial for my first name, and then my last name, Wiedner, WIEDNER. And I would love to connect with you on on LinkedIn, maintain some conversation there, and get to know you a little bit more, and all your other project manager friends. So join my community. I'd love that.
Fantastic. So again, thank you very much, Stephan, for coming on the show, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
You as well, Nigel. Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Hopefully you really enjoyed that second part of that conversation with Stephan, and you'll be able to take some of those that learning with you. I urge you, jump on to Stephan's website, have a look at what else he offers, and yeah, cool. Other than that, I think I'll let you go. Have a great day. Bye. So this is my final wrap up. Every week you're going to hear this, you're going to get bored of it, but you can always click next podcast if so. If you have enjoyed it, if you listen to this podcast to the end of this show and you think that was great, I'd love to be able to help Nigel out. There are loads of ways you can do it. The first and obvious way is to share the podcast, send it out to people. If you know colleagues and friends who'd benefit from it, you think they'd enjoy it, just send them the link. Grab one of the links, or send them to www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts. That's www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts, and that will push them over to a Linktree link, and it's got all of the different ways they can consume the podcast. If you are feeling generous and have a big bag of cash, you could grab a copy of one of my books. Obviously, they're available in all the usual places, in print and digital. Again, jump on the website, www.nigelcreaser.com/shop, and that will give you a list of all the different ways that you can contribute and grab copies of the book. Also got links to all my guests' books on there as well, where I get a little bit of a kickback from them. If you are of a sporting mind, I have a number through doing some of my judo and running antics. I've managed to secure a few affiliate links and affiliates there as well. So in there, somewhere in the sponsors page, there's links to those as well. So clicking onto those and grabbing if you're looking to get super fit, then that would be fabulous as well, and I get a little kickback from those. I have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/sundaylunchpm. So again, you can ping something in there, buy me a coffee or whatever. And finally, obviously the most important is coming back, listen again, because the more of you that come back, the more visibility I get, because there's more times that it's downloaded and all the SEO works and things like that. So yeah, that's it. So if you can help me out, I would be much appreciated. If you can't, don't worry about it. Thank you very much. Cheers now. Bye.
Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.